evening. Welcome back to my channel. I'm back again to start reading Creepers. We're gonna finish this book before Halloween. It's actually been really good. Yeah, this book is really good. So, I didn't make it out to Dollar Tree today. I had to, go paint one of my mom's walls. I had to prime it, so I did 2 coats of primer. And then tomorrow, I'm taking her to Lowe's to go pick out some paint. And I will be painting it tomorrow. I'll take a picture after. I'll do a before and after with the primer on it. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with my gummies. I love my gummies. It's the Lego ones. I say grab yourself some if you're at Dollar Tree. And the gum I got at Fred Meyer, Kroger. Oh my gosh, I gotta tell you something. I'm a little irritated when I called the company too. So, the Popwell, you can only find it at Kroger. They don't have it at Safeway or Winco. And it's makers of sparkling ice. So sparkling ice makes Popwell. So at Kroger, it used to be $1.50. Just this, like in springtime of this year. And then it went up to like $1.79. And then it went up to $2 a piece. Okay, and then they were making it sound like you had this great deal at you can get 2 of them for $4, so $2 a piece. And then I just went in there today to go get my shingle shot at the pharmacy, and when I went to go find my Popwell, oh my god, I'm livid. $3 for one. $3. Now Poppy is only $2.49. So I called the number back here, Talking Rain Beverage Company in Preston, Washington, and I complained about the price. So they're supposed to get back to me. I don't know if it's the grocery store that sets the price. I don't know. So I was pretty irritated because I can't find Poppy or Popwell anywhere else. This one's one of my favorites. And K-O-E is another one of my favorites. They're expensive too, though. Maybe if my channel gets bigger, they'll sponsor me and just give me pallets of this stuff. Anyways, okay. Proceeding with chapter 8. Okay, let's see where I'm gonna read the last paragraph, okay? And I'm gonna bring you down. It says here, I'm sorry, I have to go. Do what you want. But if we don't, see you on Monday. Repossession papers will be served first thing Tuesday morning. Mr. Kerr said as he went out the front door. David heard his dad slam the door shut. Chapter 8, All Wet. Sorry, I'm trying to chew. Okay. Mr. Kerr rushed from the house, protecting himself from the heavy rain with his briefcase. He jumped into his car, a brand new white BMW. David watched him from his bedroom window. David was reluctant to go anywhere near his dad right now. In the car, Mr. Kerr struggled to keep his face straight. As soon as he had driven out of the farm gates and onto the main road, a broad grin appeared on his face. He quickly dialed a number on his phone. After a couple of rings, someone answered. It's done. A few more days and it's ours. This is the big one, Jim. We'll make a cool million from this deal. Mr. Kerr spoke loudly, battling against the noise of the car. How did it go? No problems, asked Jim Cullen, Mr. Kerr's business associate. No problem at all, replied Mr. Kerr. He is just a small-time farmer. I had to really sell it, of course. Pretend that we tried to help him. Does he suspect anything? Mr. Cullen asked, sounding a little less composed than his partner. Well, he has heard about the development. Threatened to take us to court, but he'll never be able to prove anything. I've covered all our tracks, replied Mr. Kerr. I hope you have. I really hope you have, Mr. Cullen stated nervously. Don't worry, Jim. I've taken care of everything. Once we serve the papers on Tuesday, we can celebrate. Until then, business as usual. See you tomorrow. Bye. It's my favorite because I know I just jumped into this. It's a flavored prebiotic soda, and it only has 1 gram of sugar, and it's only 35 calories. And so yeah, I really like it. Okay. Mr. Kerr pressed the end call button on the phone. He looked in the rearview mirror and allowed himself another smile. You've made it now. You're in the big time, he thought as he looked at himself. Mr. Kerr had been manager of the local bank for 5 years. He had worked up from a clerk position to running the bank. He had always been ambitious. To most, Mr. Kerr's career would have been considered a success. Not to Mr. Kerr. He thought he deserved better. He had been really irked when he was passed over twice for a promotion at the bank's headquarters. He hated being stuck in a small rural town pandering as he sought to farmers. Now he was using his position at the bank to cheat a family out of their home and livelihood just to get what he wanted: money. He had already signed agreements with a major development company. His dream was going to be reality. Okay, let me grab a couple pieces of my chewing gum. Just two. The road ahead was very dark, but the new car's powerful headlights were casting a wide, bright beam. Mr. Kerr lived on the other side of town, but the country roads were quiet. take him long to cover the few extra miles. As the car approached a sharp bend, Mr. Kerr slowed down. He knew the road well. Just beyond the corner stood the old stone bridge spanning the river. As his car came around the bend, the headlights showed some obstruction blocking the road. "What now?" exclaimed Mr. Kerr impatiently under his breath. It was now raining very heavily, and the last thing he wanted was to get out in the rain and struggle with some fallen tree. He could see now that it was a tree blocking the road. It didn't occur to Mr. Kerr that it was very strange for a tree to end up covering a bridge with water on either side. Mr. Kerr stopped the car a few yards short of where the tree was and turned the engine off. Sorry, I have paint on my finger. He stared out of his windshield for a few minutes, shook his head, and then reached for the door handle. As he stepped out of the car, he immediately felt the rain pelting down on him. He cursed the weather and walked up to the tree and stood over it. There was no way, it seemed, that he was going to be able to move it. He put his foot on top of the tree, testing if it could be rolled away. It wouldn't budge. Suddenly, a loud noise came from behind him. Mr. Kerr immediately recognized the sound as his own car high-pitched revving. Someone had gotten into his car, turned the car on, and was revving the engine. "What on earth? What do you think you are doing?" Mr. Kerr shouted angrily, peering through the headlight's beam. He lifted his hand to his eyes, trying to block the glare and make out who was sitting behind the wheel of his car. The glare was strong, and he could see nothing except what looked like a hat. He started to move toward the car, but as he did, the car started to move toward him. "Stop right there," Mr. Kerr shouted, his anger rising. The car was closing in on him. It started to move more quickly. Mr. Kerr took a couple steps back, tried again to make out who was on the other side of the windshield. He still couldn't see clearly with the lights blinding him. The car kept coming. His anger quickly turned into fear as he sensed he was in real danger. The fear was paralyzing him. Mr. Kerr made a move to his left, trying to get out of the car's path. But as he did, the car immediately turned and continued straight for him. Mr. Kerr looked around. The tree was behind him and to his right now, its long branches blocking his way and impeding his retreat. To his left, the bridge wall. He edged backwards. The car kept coming. There was only one way to go. He had to jump onto the wall. The bridge wall was very narrow, only about 5 inches wide. Mr. Kerr put his hand on top of the wall and hopped up. He wobbled slightly, his arms flapping. His upper body leaned over and his eyes fixed on the water below. The heavy rain had turned the normally quiet river into a raging torrent. Mr. Kerr regained his balance and turned around. "This isn't funny anymore," he shouted, trying to inject some form of authority into his voice. "Get out of my car," he screamed. As if in reply to Mr. Kerr's demand, the car stopped inches from the wall and the car door started to open. Slowly, the dark figure got out. Mr. Kerr narrowed his eyes, following the stranger's movements as he came around from behind the car door. Mr. Kerr stared hard as the effects of the glare from the headlights disappeared. The figure became clear. "What the?" The horror in his voice was chilling. Mr. Kerr moved to step back, forgetting where he was. His feet couldn't stop himself. He was going over. As he fell back, he managed to grab the wall with one hand, the skin tearing from his fingers as he tried to hold it to hold his full weight. His hand was slipping. He stretched out with the other hand, trying to get another hold on the wall. He couldn't make it. He looked at the rushing water below. "Help, help me, please," Mr. Kerr pleaded. The pain in his fingers was too strong, the weight too much. He started to slip away as his hand came away from the wall and he began his fall into the water. He got a glimpse of the head leaning over the wall. It was a wooden head. The noise of the wind and the rain drowned out his screams as he plunged into the rushing water. The scarecrow turned away. There he goes. Chapter 9. Do not stand in my way. The next morning, the Davies house was somber. Everyone could see that Mr. Davies was in a terrible mood. David had heard his mother crying for most of the night. Even now, her eyes were red and sore. David's were too. He had managed to sleep very little over the past 2 nights, and he still hadn't been able to talk to his dad. Mr. Davies had stormed out minutes after Mr. Kerr had left and hadn't returned until after everyone had gone to bed. Sarah and Emma had no idea what was going on, but David knew the family was in serious trouble. He had heard Mr. Kerr's ultimatum. His dad had to pay the bank by Monday or they were going to lose the farm. David was glad it was Saturday. He couldn't have faced school again. He was a mess. He was tired, confused, worried, and scared. His dad was messing around in the barn, repairing the digger. It had suddenly broken down first thing that morning as he had started to clear the field in front. The field with the scarecrow in it. David was waiting for his dad to come in. He had made up his mind that no matter what, he had to tell his dad about the scarecrow. Even if his dad refused to accept what he was saying, at least he would get it off his chest. He felt so lonely and isolated. There was of course Sarah, but he needed his dad to know. As David waited, the phone rang. Sarah ran to answer it, expecting to hear her friend's voice. She was expecting a call, but when she answered, she was disappointed. "Mom, it's Officer Collins again," she shouted, trying to reach her mom upstairs. Mrs. Davies came down. The Morrison incident, long replaced by the worries of the family's financial problems. She took the receiver from Emma. "Hello, officer. How can I help you?" she asked. David moved into the hallway where his mother was taking the call. He watched as the shock appeared on her face. She put her hand over the receiver. David, go and get your dad quickly," she ordered. David could see the anxiety in her eyes. He spun around immediately and ran to get his dad. The two returned quickly. Mrs. Davies was standing with the telephone. She was rooted to the spot since Officer Collins had hung up. Mr. Davies rushed to his wife, anticipating that her legs were about to give out Mr. Davies rushed to his wife, anticipating that her legs were about to give out on her any second. That was hard to say. He ushered her into the living room. Mrs. Davies spoke first. "He was sitting on that chair only a few hours ago." "What is it? What happened now?" asked Mr. Davies, confused and worried. Mrs. Davies relayed her brief conversation with Officer Collins. She explained that they had found Mr. Kerr's car in the river this morning. He He is missing, but they are out searching for him. The river was so high last night, he must have been swept up in it. They are looking downstream for him now. But how on earth? Where did this happen? Interrupted Mr. Davies. Next to the old bridge on the way to town. They can't understand what happened to him. They couldn't find evidence of the car losing control on the road. It looks like he just calmly drove up and into the river, Mrs. Davies replied, her eyes filling up. Oh, John, what's going on? First that man the other night, and now this. What's going on? Mrs. Davies pleaded, beginning to break down. Mr. Davies held his wife in his arms, trying to comfort her. His mind drifted to the meeting he had with Mr. Kerr the night before. David had listened to his mom relaying the news about Mr. Kerr. It didn't take him long to add the Mr. Kerr incident to all the others. Mr. Kerr was threatening the farm. David had also heard the rumors about the golf course development. Most of the town seemed to know that Mr. Kerr had wanted their farm for some time. Last night it had looked as if he was about to get his way with the Monday deadline. David didn't buy the police officer's story. Something or somebody was to blame. David knew it had to be the scarecrow. David waited for his dad to come out of the living room. Dad, I have to talk to you, David started. It is important, son. I need to see your mom. She is really upset, replied Mr. Davies. Dad, before I tell you anything, I need you to come outside with me. I need you to look at the scarecrow with me, David continued. Look, son, enough of this nonsense, Mr. Davies snapped. Dad, just do it, okay? David insisted, raising his voice. Mr. Davies was taken aback by his son's tone. He recognized that there was something upsetting David. He put his arm around him. Come on, let's go, Mr. Davies said, heading for the kitchen door. The two crossed the yard in silence, climbed the fence, and made their way across the field to where the scarecrow stood. David approached the wooden figure nervously. Mr. Davies could see that his son was really bothered by the scarecrow. David lifted the hat from the scarecrow's head and pointed to the words engraved on top. Mr. Davies was a good 18 inches taller than his son and could easily see the words written on the bald head. This land is yours for you to scare. All beings who perchance do dare to disturb or threaten without pity. This house is peace and prosperity. The big farmer looked at his son and then read the words again as if to make sure he understood their meaning. I have no idea what to think, he said, shaking his head. Let's go back. They walked slowly back toward the house. On the way, David rapidly ran through all the events of the past few days, connecting everything back to the eerie words written on the scarecrow's head. In every case, the person or animal affected had been connected to the farm and in some way threatening or disturbing it. David told his dad about witnessing the scarecrow disappearing and then reappearing. When they reached the kitchen door, Mr. Davies looked back. The scarecrow looked so normal, like all the scarecrows he had seen in all the years he had been working as a farmer. As they entered the kitchen, Mr. Davies took his son's arm. Listen, son, don't say a word of this to anyone, especially not to your mother. She's at her wit's end at the moment. I'll have to think about this for a while. I don't want to make us the laughingstock of the whole town. He paused, his mind struggling to accept what seemed inconceivable. But he was beginning to share his son's anxiousness. At least, he thought, if there was something going on, it didn't seem to be posing any threat to his family. If it was the scarecrow, it seemed to be trying to protect them. I have to go into town and go to the bank to see how things stand for Monday, said Mr. Davies. I don't know how this business with Mr. Kerr is going to affect things. When I come back, we'll light a fire and burn the thing. And then let's see what happens. Mr. Davies left 10 minutes later. The bank was usually closed on Saturdays, but Mr. Davies had managed to get someone on the phone. As the news had broken about their manager, some of the staff had gone in to find out more. David was worried. He had felt better telling his dad, and he was happy to see that his dad seemed to share his concerns. However, he wished that they had dealt with the scarecrow before he had left for town. The hours passed slowly. David remained in his room until late afternoon. His dad had still not come back. He tried to keep his mind off things by playing his guitar and some video games, but his mind kept wandering to the scarecrow. Eventually, he pulled back his curtains to look at the wooden man. David stepped back. The fear returned in a flash. The scarecrow was gone. He ran downstairs and scanned the yard from the kitchen door. Did Dad come back and take the horrible thing away to burn it? He thought more in hope than anything. He ran out to see if he could see his dad's car or his dad himself. There was no sign. He heard a noise from the barn. He hesitated and then walked toward the entrance. Suddenly from inside he heard a voice. "Looking for me, David." David froze. It was not his dad's voice. It was not any voice he recognized. He could sense the presence in the barn before he could see it. He entered the barn, his legs like jelly, the fear taking over his body. "Hello, David." The wooden scarecrow stepped from behind some bales of hay, moving in a slow, deliberate manner. David stood motionless, unable to speak. All his fears were now a reality. Morrison had not been a madman. As far as he could tell, this thing in front of him was really dangerous. The scarecrow's strained, slightly high-pitched voice continued. "David, do not stand in my way. I was made for this. I am doing what I must do." David struggled to speak, his throat and lips completely dry. Eventually, he blurted out, "But why?" "I serve the farm, David. I was made to protect it. People are not important. People come and go." "But the land remains forever. I serve the land. The farm and the land," the scarecrow replied. The significance of the scarecrow's words hit David. The scarecrow wasn't protecting them. It was only interested in the farm and the land. Anything that the land was in danger. "Do not stand in my way, David. Do not try to stop me. Heed my words," the scarecrow hissed. He moved toward David. David closed his eyes, paralyzed by fear. He felt the scarecrow walk by him, and then he felt the scarecrow's presence disappear. David opened his eyes. He was alone. He fell to the floor, his legs finally giving out. Amazing. I don't know if I should just continue. I think chapter 10 is the last chapter. Okay, let's just go on. David opened his eyes. Sarah was standing above him. "What happened to you, David? Are you okay?" Sarah asked, a little shocked by the sight of her brother sprawled on the barn floor. David picked himself up, his legs still a little unsteady and his head sore from hitting the barn floor. He must have been unconscious for some time. He immediately looked beyond his sister. In the field behind her, he could see the the still dark figure back in its usual spot. Come on, Sarah. Let's get out of here. David stated, grabbing his sister's arm. Now, he insisted as his sister hesitated, staring out into the field and sensing that Scarecrow was the reason for her brother's state. They ran back to the kitchen. Mrs. Davies was working at the sink. David and Sarah walked through the kitchen and went upstairs. What is it, David? What is going on? Sarah asked anxiously. We are in danger, Sarah. Real danger, David replied. David told her about his encounter in the barn. Sarah buried her head in her pillow, her brother's words sending a chill right through her. Sarah, I want you to get Mom and take her into the living room and keep her there. Make up some story about school. Keep her talking. Don't come out until I get back. David, where are you going? What are you going to do? Sarah pleaded, unsure what was going through her brother's mind. David knew what he had to do. He couldn't afford to wait until his dad got home. He was going to have to do it himself. His family was in danger, and he had no idea when the Scarecrow was going to strike again or against whom. He was already getting worried that his dad had taken so long. Maybe the Scarecrow would see his family as a threat. Maybe he would blame them if the farm were ripped up and turned into a golf course. Go, Sarah, get Mom, David said, pacing the room, thinking his way through his next move. David heard his mom and Sarah go into the living room. He ran downstairs, out the kitchen door, and into the shed. He knew what he was looking for. He had seen it there. He had seen it there the other day. Where was it now? David moved his mic. There it was. David picked up the old oil lamp. He lifted the lid. Good, there was plenty of oil in the bottom. David ran back to the kitchen. It was getting dark now. David searched in the sink drawer. He found the box of matches and stuffed them into his pocket. He ran to the barn and grabbed as much hay as he could carry. He stopped as he came out of the barn and looked into the field. The Scarecrow was still. David took a few deep breaths and walked forward. He climbed the fence, careful not to spill the oil from the lamp. As he approached the wooden monster, he had no idea what to expect. He kept his eyes fixed on it. It could move at any point. He had to take his chance. He had no idea what governed when and how the Scarecrow could come to life. He had to protect his family. David came up to the Scarecrow and started wrapping the hay around the monster's legs. David didn't take his eyes off the Scarecrow's face. No movement. He searched in his pocket. The matches weren't there. Blood rushed to his head. Other pocket. He found them. He had to put the lamp down to light the match. The match lit first dry. He put it to the wick. Come on, he pleaded, urging the wick to light. The wick flickered and the flame took hold. He lifted the lamp above his head, preparing himself to smash it down with all his force at the base of the Scarecrow. He hesitated. He could hear the sound of a car approaching. David glanced around, hoping to see his dad's car. As he turned away, his eyes momentarily leaving the monster's face, he felt something grab the lamp. He spun around, and the Scarecrow's face was smiling an evil smile. The Scarecrow reached out, its hand tightening around David's neck. David somehow broke free and ran. He could hear the Scarecrow following behind, its legs speeding through the overgrown grass. He could sense he was close. David clambered over the fence as he had done the previous day when he had read the words on the Scarecrow's head. As he landed on the other side of the Scarecrow, the Scarecrow landed too. The monster still held the oil lamp. The lamp's glow cast an eerie light across the Scarecrow's face. The Scarecrow moved around, blocking David's path to the house. David looked around, his desire for survival controlling his fear. He started to go right, then stopped and darted left toward the barn. He ran in and buried himself behind some bales of hay, the chickens flapping nervously at the noise of him rushing in. The Scarecrow followed slowly, knowing he had his prey trapped. David could see the light from the lamp's glow lighting up the entrance as the Scarecrow walked in. He crouched down, trying to calm his breathing and think what to do next. He lifted his head slightly. His eyes found a gap between the two bales. Peering through the bales, you could trace the Scarecrow's movements by the movements of the light. He was coming closer. The Scarecrow's chilling voice broke the silence. David, I warned you. Now you must pay the price. David looked up. The bales of hay were piled 3 high. The Scarecrow was directly in front of him now, on the other side of the bales. David took a couple of steps back and steadied himself. The Scarecrow spun around, sensing David's movement. David ran, jumped, and launched himself at the bales of hay. The Scarecrow looked up just as the first bale hit him. The oil lamp smashed to the floor and burst into flames. The Scarecrow's legs and arms, stuffed with hay, immediately caught fire. Within seconds, the bales all over the barn were in flames. The chickens scampered frantically, trying to make their exit, their noise adding to the chaotic scene. David tried to pick himself above the floor, but the whole barn now seemed like one big ball. Of fire. He could just make out the spot where the Scarecrow had been. He caught sight of something. He recognized the Scarecrow's old hat. He couldn't see anything else except flames. He started to crawl forward, the smoke beginning to enter his lungs. He started to cough. Sorry, the guy that drives that stupid car does this every night. It's annoying. Oh shoot, sorry. Okay. I'm keeping it real. I'm just keeping it real. He started to crawl forward, the smoke beginning to enter his lungs. He started to cough, struggling for every breath. The heat was overpowering. Suddenly, he felt something reaching for him, pulling at his legs. He tried to get free, crawl away, but the smoke had taken its toll, and he had no strength. He could run no more. He felt himself being lifted in the air. His heart was pounding. He was helpless. Come on, son, let's get out of here. Mr. Davies threw his son over his shoulder and rushed out of the barn. He placed his son against the kitchen door. David struggled to catch his breath, the smoke still deep inside his lungs. He felt his mom's arms around him, his head swimming, and his vision blurred. Mrs. Davies hugged him tightly, shocked at the sight of her son. Mr. Davies knelt down in front of his son. I said, "All over, Davy. Is he gone?" Mr. Davies asked, 2 hands on his son's shoulders. David looked at the barn, the flames leaping high into the sky. He looked back at his dad and nodded nodded his head. He's gone, Dad. David stood up and took a few steps toward the barn. Mr. Davies came and stood by his side. They stared at the wall of flames in front of them. The farm is safe, son. We're going to be fine, Mr. Davies said, his broad arm over his son's shoulder. The Scarecrow saw to it all, Dad. I am sure of it, David said, looking up at his father. He wasn't interested in anything else, only the farm. Well, he has protected it for the last time. It's up to us now, Mr. Davies stated reassuringly, turning back to the house. Come on, son, let's get you inside. David looked out to the empty field one last time. He felt safe at last. Epilogue. David, will you stop reading that paper and give me a hand? David's wife, Anne, snapped impatiently. It was your idea to go on a picnic, so come on. David's married now, whoa. David put down the paper and helped his wife lay out the blanket on the grass. It was Sunday afternoon and it was a scorcher. As soon as David had woken up that morning and seen the blue sky, he had decided that it was a good day to pack the family in the car and travel to one of their favorite spots in the hills near their home. The kids loved to get out in the open and explore. The journey had taken them about an hour, and the two boys, Alan and Paul, had behaved the whole way. Alan had just turned 5 and Paul was almost 3 years old. They were very close and loved to play together. Within minutes, Anne had covered the blanket with juice and cake for the boys and sandwiches and a bottle of wine for herself and David. Go and find the boys, dear, it's ready, Anne said, spotting her husband picking up the paper again. The boys never wandered far. There were explorers indeed, but there weren't that brave yet. David had kept one eye on his sons and seen them wander down a small path a few yards away. David followed the path through the trees. He soon heard the noise of the two boys playing. He spotted them halfway up a wooden fence pointing into the field straight ahead. A Scarecrow stood about 20 yards from the fence. The boys heard their dad approach. They turned around to look at him, broad smiles lighting up their faces. What are scarecrows supposed to scare, Dad? Alan asked, looking back at the Scarecrow. Oh, they look after the crops. They just scare away anything that tries to eat the crops. So they're not supposed to scare us? Little Paul asked innocently. David smiled, the memories buried deep inside him. No, son, they're not supposed to scare us. Come on, let's go. Your mom has some treats for you, he replied, lifting the two boys off the fence, one in each arm. He set them down and started to chase them up the path toward their afternoon picnic. As the boys ran on, David stopped. He couldn't resist a glance back. The field was empty. Uh-oh, the Scarecrow's back. Okay. We finished it. It was a good book. Okay, I'm going to Dollar Tree tomorrow morning to see what is out there and to see if I can get any of the stuff on my wish list. Alright, I'll see you guys. Have a great day, great night, great morning, wherever you're at.